I used to work as a security guard in a large food company. I was responsible for administrative security, and my shift was at night from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. All the workers and employees in the company would leave by 9 p.m. At midnight, I would make sure that everything was in order. Then I would lock all the company's doors and enter the security room. I would then sit down as usual to monitor the cameras and listen to podcasts. On this particular day, I was listening to a novel on the podcast, and when it was midnight, sleep overwhelmed me, and I unintentionally dozed off. I woke up to find myself surrounded by darkness. The power had gone out, and I felt unable to move my body. However, I was aware that what I was experiencing was a state of sleep paralysis. Despite that, I tried my best to get up from the chair, and I managed to stand. Then I went to the room's door and looked through the glass, and I saw them. They looked extremely terrifying, dwarves trying to open the door. I also saw my relatives who were supposed to be dead trying to open the door as well. Suddenly, the door opened. All the dwarves and the relatives I'd seen attacked me. In that moment, I woke up and found myself asleep in the chair, and the power had indeed gone out, and the door to the security room was closed. The second story is about a woman telling a story that happened to her father, who worked at a factory from 10 p.m. until 8 a.m. At that time, there was a secluded room at the end of the factory where no one ventured. After finishing his shift one day at 3 a.m., he decided to enter the room to relax for a while before resuming his work. He turned on the radio and lay down to unwind. Suddenly, two women appeared seemingly out of nowhere. It's worth noting that when he entered the room, there was no one present. These women were dressed in all black attire, and their features were so indistinct that he couldn't be certain if they were real women. At that moment, he noticed that the few workers in the factory, whom he knew very well, started to behave strangely. They began assaulting their own fingers, indicating some familiarity with one another. This left him wondering about the identity of these individuals. Unexpectedly, they turned their aggression towards him, screaming and pulling their hair with bone-chilling sounds that sent shivers down his spine. Overwhelmed with fear, the woman's father sought refuge under the covers, praying for safety as the terrifying scene continued to unfold. Suddenly, the radio volume escalated, and the women vanished, leaving everything as it was before. Everyone in the factory swore that they hadn't seen or heard anything in that room. When I was young, about 5 years old, there were moments when I would enter the room and find my father sitting on the couch, his eyes red and wide open. He would scream loudly, "Get out!" On another occasion, I saw him transform into a gigantic animal. As I grew a little older, I thought these were just myths or dreams, but I considered them real, especially since my father was a very kind person. However, due to my young age and lack of understanding, I was afraid of him during that time. At that time, we lived in a 4-story building. The first floor was occupied by my father, who owned a store selling new and sometimes used furniture. The second floor was a storage area, but we rented a room from it for eating and drinking. At the end of the day, we would go to our apartment on the 3rd floor to sleep. One night, while playing in the street at around 7 years old, I was coming up the stairs, and the door to the 2nd floor was open with light shining from it. That's when I saw a woman wearing a black cloak, her veil covering her face. I couldn't make out her features, and she was a few centimeters above the ground with no feet. She was flying. She passed right in front of me, and I thought it was my brother trying to scare me. I kept calling out to him and my sisters, thinking they were playing a prank on me. But this woman didn't even look in my direction. She continued walking as if nothing was unusual. When I reached the third floor, I found all my sisters, my mother, and my father upstairs. There was no one downstairs in the storage area. What I later discovered was that my father had bought a bed for a deceased woman and placed it in the storage area. Unfortunately, that woman had died in a fire.